What would life be like for a boy who has always been taught to follow the wrong path, but one day finds the chance to change his trajectory? This is the story of Samuel, a 14-year-old boy living in an underprivileged community in the suburbs of a large city in the United States. Since he was little, Samuel observed the streets around him, where violence and crime seemed to be the only options available. He dreamed of one day escaping that life, but reality always pulled him back into the same cycle. The desire for a better life mingled with a deep fear that he would never be able to escape. Samuel's life was marked by daily challenges. He grew up in a small house where money was scarce, and meals were often just a fraction of what they should be. His friends, many of whom were also poor, got involved with gangs, and the pressure to join them was constant. Every day, Samuel faced a difficult choice: to follow the path that everyone expected of him, or to fight for something different. He knew that getting involved in crime could offer an easier and quicker life, but deep down, his heart longed for something more. It was then that Samuel met Arthur, a wealthy and successful man who had a different outlook on life. Arthur, who had grown up in a completely opposite environment, saw in Samuel a potential that he himself did not recognize. With patience and wisdom, he began to teach the boy about the possibilities that education and hard work could offer. Samuel listened attentively to every word from Arthur, absorbing knowledge that inspired him to dream bigger. The encounter with Arthur was a turning point in Samuel's life. He began to question his own choices and reflect on what he truly wanted for the future. The insecurity and doubt that had accompanied him were gradually replaced by a new hope. Samuel felt lost, but now that feeling was transforming into a growing determination. He wanted to be more than what society expected of him. He wanted to be someone who could change his life and, perhaps, inspire others along the way. However, the challenge was great. Samuel had to deal with the pressure from his friends, who encouraged him to stick to the easy path. He faced moments of weakness and temptation, but the connection he had created with Arthur and the new vision of the future helped him resist. The boy was on a journey of self-discovery and overcoming, seeking not only to escape his past, but also to build a bright future. Samuel was caught in a storm of emotions. Each day, the struggle between who he wanted to be and what his surroundings expected of him grew stronger. Arthur's words echoed in his mind, but the reality of the streets pulled him down. Friends, who once were his allies, now seemed to become a burden. They didn't understand why Samuel was distancing himself, and the pressure to join them in their illicit schemes grew increasingly intense. On a particularly difficult day, Samuel found himself on a corner, surrounded by his friends. They were planning a small robbery, something that seemed harmless but could have serious consequences. Adrenaline coursed through everyone's veins, and the idea of making some quick money was tempting. Samuel hesitated, remembering Arthur and everything he had learned. He wanted to refuse, but the pressure was enormous. His friends looked at him, waiting for his approval. It was at that moment that Lucas, a childhood friend, made a comment that cut Samuel like a knife. "You're not one of us anymore, are you? Now that you're with that rich master, you think you're better than us?" Lucas's words hit Samuel hard. He felt a deep pain, as if he were being torn from his own identity. Doubts settled in his heart, and he began to question whether he should continue this quest for a different future. That night, Samuel locked himself in his room. He looked at himself in the mirror, a boy haunted by confusion. The weight of what he was about to do consumed him. He remembered Arthur's words, who always said that true strength lay in doing what was right, even when it was difficult. But what was right, after all? To be loyal to his friends, or to seek what could be a better future? The dilemma consumed his mind, and he felt he was on the brink of a collapse. The next day, Samuel decided he needed to talk to Arthur. He needed guidance, a light in the darkness. When he arrived at Arthur's house, the man welcomed him with a warm smile. But as soon as the conversation started, Samuel found himself struggling to put into words what he was feeling. Arthur, noticing the boy's distress, asked what was weighing on his mind. Samuel finally opened up, revealing the pressure he felt from his friends and the fear of losing his identity. Arthur listened attentively, and then told Samuel about his own youth, when he also faced similar challenges. He spoke about the importance of following one's own path and how, often, that meant leaving behind people who didn't understand his choices. The conversation was a balm for Samuel, who left Arthur's house feeling a little lighter, but the battle was still far from over. Tension rose when, at a meeting in the park, Samuel encountered his friends again. They were more aggressive, and the conversation quickly turned into a fight. Lucas, in a moment of anger, threatened Samuel, saying that if he didn't become part of the group, he would be treated like a traitor. The boy felt his heart race. He was at a crossroads. While he wanted to distance himself from that life, he didn't want to lose Lucas, a friend who had always been by his side. In the days that followed, Samuel felt increasingly isolated. The pressure from his friends was heavy, and the idea of joining them again haunted him. He began to pull away even more from Arthur, thinking that perhaps, if he stayed away from his mentor, things would resolve themselves. But this only increased his internal confusion. He was feeling lost, not knowing who to turn to. As he battled his own demons, Samuel also began to notice changes in his friends. Life in the gangs was not as glamorous as it seemed. Lucas and others were getting involved in bigger problems, and Samuel started to realize that the path they had chosen could lead to tragic consequences. This new reality made him question his choices even more. He wanted to be strong, but weakness was creeping into his mind. It was then that, in a moment of desperation, Samuel decided he needed a fresh start. He sought out Arthur and asked for help. The man, who had always believed in the boy's potential, welcomed him with open arms. Together, they worked on a plan for Samuel to get involved in constructive activities, like a mentoring program for youth in the community. This new direction offered Samuel a sense of purpose, but it also brought new challenges. With each step he took on this new journey, Samuel faced emotional and physical challenges. He had to deal with the anger and frustration of his friends, who did not accept his new life. He also felt guilty for leaving behind those who, in his mind, were still his friends. The pressure mounted when the gangs began to turn against him, and Samuel had to learn to defend himself not just physically, but emotionally as well. During this process, Samuel began to make new friends. He met Anna, a girl who also dreamed of escaping the life around her. Together, they supported each other, sharing their hopes and fears. But their friendship also faced challenges, such as disagreements about what was more important, the past or the future. Samuel found himself in the midst of an internal conflict, questioning whether he could really leave everything behind. Samuel's journey was just beginning, and each step he took brought him closer to his dreams, but also confronted him with his greatest insecurities. The road ahead was uncertain, and the struggle within him continued. He was determined to move forward, but the obstacles were many and the journey was far from easy. As Samuel adapted to his new life and engaged with the mentoring program, an unexpected event shook his routine. One night, as he was returning home, he heard screams coming from a nearby alley. Curious and concerned, he decided to investigate. As he got closer, he saw Lucas, his old friend, in the midst of a fight with other young men. Samuel's heart raced. He wanted to help, but the scene was chaotic and violent. Lucas was surrounded, and the situation seemed to worsen by the second. Samuel hesitated, remembering what Arthur had told him about not getting involved in conflicts that could ruin him. But seeing the desperate look in Lucas's eyes, the loyalty he felt for his friend pulled him forward. Without thinking, Samuel shouted, trying to calm the situation. But his words were not enough. The fight continued, and in a moment of despair, Lucas was pushed to the ground, falling violently. Samuel's heart broke at the sight of his injured friend. He felt a wave of anger and helplessness. Without thinking, he threw himself into the fight, trying to separate the young men. However, the situation quickly spiraled out of control. One of the attackers, in a desperate act, pulled out a knife and, in a swift motion, directed it toward Lucas. Time seemed to stop as Samuel watched everything unfold. In a reckless impulse, Samuel stepped between Lucas and the attacker. The knife cut into his arm, and the pain was intense, but the adrenaline kept him from feeling it. He pushed the assailant back, making him retreat, while Lucas, dazed, tried to get up. The fight ceased, and quickly, the group of young men fled, leaving Samuel and Lucas in the alley, amidst the heavy silence. Samuel fell to the ground, feeling the pain throb in his arm. His vision began to blur, and fear took hold of him. Lucas, now free from danger, knelt beside his friend. "What did you do?" said Lucas, his voice choked with concern. Samuel, panting and with his head spinning, could hardly respond. What had he done? He had risked his life for someone who, until that moment, did not seem to understand his internal struggle. When the ambulance arrived, Samuel was taken to the hospital. As the medical team treated his wound, he felt overwhelmed by a mix of emotions: physical pain, fear, and deep sadness. He realized that his attempt to help Lucas not only injured him physically, but also made him question his choices. He had stepped out of his comfort zone, had set aside the new life he was building, and what had he gained in return? A wound and a friend who, until then, did not seem willing to understand him. In the following days, as he recovered, Samuel reflected on what had happened. He realized that by trying to save Lucas, he had jeopardized his future and everything he had worked to build. The pain in his arm was a constant reminder that he was still trapped in a world he no longer wanted to be part of. More than that, the wound was a symbol of his internal struggle, the battle between what was expected of him and what he truly wanted. The conversation with Lucas, when he finally found the courage to face his friend, was difficult. Lucas was remorseful, but the feeling of betrayal still hung in the air. "You didn't have to do this, Samuel. You're no longer one of us," Lucas said, his voice full of confusion. Samuel felt a deep pain. He wanted Lucas to understand that it wasn't about being part of the group or not, but about choosing a path that would lead him to a better future. From that moment on, Samuel decided he needed to distance himself from his old life once and for all. He could no longer feel guilty for wanting something different. He began to connect more with the mentoring program, helping other young people understand that there was a different path that didn't involve gangs or violence. This helped him find a new purpose, and gradually, the pain began to transform into strength. At the same time, his relationship with Lucas became even more complicated. The friendship that once seemed unbreakable was now filled with tensions and misunderstandings. The loyalty Samuel felt for Lucas was challenged, and he found himself in a dilemma: to continue fighting for a friendship that dragged him down, or to move on and seek his own happiness. This decision would not be easy, but he knew he had to make it to finally find peace in his heart. Samuel was facing one of the most difficult moments of his life. After the incident in the alley, he found himself not only with a hurt arm, but with a wounded soul. The physical pain was a constant reminder of what he had done for Lucas, but the real battle was within him. He felt torn between his old life and the new direction he was trying to follow. As he recovered, Samuel began to reflect on his choices. He realized that his loyalty to Lucas had put him in a dangerous place, and true loyalty should be to himself. The pain in his arm symbolized not only an injury, but also the emotional scars of a past he wanted to leave behind. He understood that in order to grow, he needed to face his fears and insecurities. Over time, Samuel decided to dedicate himself more to the mentoring program. He got involved in activities that helped him connect with other young people who were also seeking a different path. Helping others became a form of healing for him. Through these interactions, Samuel began to realize that success was not only measured in material possessions, but in the fulfillment of making a difference in someone's life. This new perspective brought a sense of purpose he had never felt before. The conversations he had with the young people made him reflect on his own experiences. He began to apply the lessons he had learned, such as the importance of stepping away from toxic environments and valuing the relationships that truly mattered. Samuel realized that personal growth was not a linear process. There were setbacks, but each mistake was an opportunity for a fresh start. His friendship with Lucas, on the other hand, was becoming increasingly complicated. Samuel felt sad to see that Lucas did not understand his transformation. During their conversations, the tension grew, but Samuel remembered that he also had the right to choose what was best for him. He needed to be honest with Lucas about his emotions, even if it meant putting their friendship at risk. Finally, in a candid conversation, Samuel shared his insecurities and hopes. He explained that his choice to step away was not a rejection, but a search for a better future. Lucas, in turn, began to see things differently. Although misunderstandings still existed, their friendship started to evolve, and both learned to respect each other's choices. As Samuel faced his challenges, he began to become a stronger version of himself. He learned that true overcoming was not just about distancing himself from the past, but about accepting his flaws and building a new life on top of them. And as he continued his journey, he felt more confident and prepared to face any obstacle life presented him. Samuel was at a critical point in his journey. On a rainy day, he decided it was time to confront Lucas once again. The weight of their friendship was becoming increasingly difficult to bear. They met in a park, where the sound of the rain hitting the leaves created a melancholic, yet necessary atmosphere. Samuel knew that this conversation could change everything. With his heart racing, he looked into Lucas's eyes and began to speak. "I'm not the same person anymore, Lucas. What happened in the alley showed me that I need to be different. If I continue down this path, I will lose myself completely." Lucas, visibly frustrated, shot back. "You are running away. You are leaving everything behind, including us." The tension in the air was palpable, and Samuel felt a lump in his throat. "I am trying to find a better path, for me and for you," Samuel replied, his voice choked. "I can't live in the past anymore. If you can't understand that, maybe it's better for us to distance ourselves." Tears began to slide down Samuel's face, and he realized he was shedding a part of his life that had always been familiar, but was now suffocating him. Lucas, in turn, saw the pain in Samuel's eyes and hesitated for a moment. He understood that Samuel's change was not a betrayal, but a quest for freedom. "I don't want to lose you, but I don't know how to help," Lucas admitted, his voice softer. At that moment, something broke between them, and the friendship, once worn down, began to rebuild on new foundations. Samuel smiled through his tears. He felt a wave of relief and hope. They still had much to learn from each other, and even though the path ahead was uncertain, their journey together, now transformed, promised a brighter future. Samuel looked at Lucas, feeling that something had changed between them. The conversation had opened a door to understanding, but there was also a weight in the air. As they parted ways, Samuel reflected on his achievements. He had faced his fears and was reinventing himself. Their friendship, once on the brink of collapse, now seemed stronger, rooted in honesty. However, as they walked in opposite directions, an unexpected connection interrupted his thoughts. It was an unknown number. Curious, Samuel answered. The voice on the other end revealed surprising news. An old friend, whom they thought had disappeared, was back in town. This twist brought forth memories and unfulfilled promises, making Samuel realize that life is made of cycles. The past could return, but now he had the strength and clarity to deal with it. He looked at Lucas, who had also heard the news, and saw a new beginning ahead of them. If their journey was filled with challenges, there was now also a new hope. They could face whatever came together, more prepared than ever. And you, have you ever gone through a transformation that changed your life? Share your story in the comments. Let's reflect on our journeys together and learn from each other. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. Your interaction is what motivates us to continue bringing this heartfelt content.